Hello. How are you? Today I'm continuing the process of remaking an old comic of mine from college, and we are now at the halfway point. Yay! Or something, I guess. I mean, hey, fixing my cringy old art is, as I said, an excellent form of self-care. So here's the refresher for anyone who's forgotten or for anyone who's new here. In my second year of college, I made a 10-page comic called Heliotrope for my storytelling class as part of the final assignment for the semester. Even though I thought it was cool at the time, there were many ill-informed and questionable decisions that went into the final product, including but absolutely not limited to wonky perspective, poorly drawn anatomy, really long necks, borderline ambiguous lighting, less than perfect lettering, at least in the context of comic lettering, and much, much more. A few months ago, I made the decision to remake the comic entirely because it deserved a glow-up and also to see the results of the 7 years of improvement and work that have gone into my art since then. I don't really plan on printing this anytime soon, so for the foreseeable future, this remake is just for fun. So with that out of the way, if you're interested in what I have to say and how I'm going to improve on this magnum opus, make sure to like and subscribe. And strap your butts in, because here we go! Without wasting any time, let's get to the subject of today's video. I covered the comic's first 4 pages over the course of the first 2 videos in this series, so today I'm going to cover pages 5 and 6. As always, let's assess the original pages. I think at this point I've grown used to seeing the cursed images that are my old artwork, but anyway, here we go. After a conversation between Gray and Theo, we're taken back to Emily and Anik, formerly known as Elaine. Both of the girls have a painfully vague conversation about the recent news before Anik's attention turns to Emily's newest painting. Then the scene shifts back to Gray and Theo's conversation, where Theo reveals why he needs Emily and his plan to stop a potentially dangerous plot. As always, I have so many questions. 19-year-old me, what were you doing? But let's get to the biggest problems first before I talk about anything else, starting with Emily and Anik's conversation in this scene. It's so vague, and the bit where they talk about Emily's painting doesn't add anything to the progression of the story or give valuable information, particularly regarding the constraints of a 10-page comic. Dialogue, as a rule, should be functionally important to the context of the scenario and the progression of the scene it takes place in. Basically, everything in a scene should have its purpose, and this just isn't it. I took this into account when I wrote the script for the remake, changing the dialogue between Emily and Anik completely into something that actually contributed to the context of the story. Emily was originally part of an underground organization full of people with special abilities, and these people are called satellites. I'm actually not sure if they went by another name back in the day, if I ever bothered to give them one at all. Theo used to be part of this organization along with Anik, while Gray is a newer member. Certain circumstances led Emily to leave the group, specifically a job gone horribly wrong. But of course, Theo needs Emily for his plans, and because of how close Emily and Anik are, Theo left the important work in this case to Anik, who now has to break the news to Emily. I wanted Emily and Anik's new conversation to reflect that, so you'll be seeing that in the remade pages. With my biggest dialogue and story-based issue out of the way, let's move on to the artwork. As usual, there's not much shot variation when it comes to composition, which leaves the energy of the page feeling stagnant. If you have an opportunity to enhance the mood that's intended to be conveyed, then you should take the opportunity to do so. But you should still compose the panels and the art inside in a way that makes sense in the context of the story and the intended mood, as I've said. And there's also a bunch of rules that you have to follow in the process, but that requires a whole other essay. Moving on to artistic choices, particularly regarding the stuff in the panels. As I said in the last video, reference is your friend. Treat yourself to using photo reference for those tricky poses today and save yourself the hassle. Otherwise, you're setting yourself up for some less than ideal decisions. Take, for example, these 3 blunders that I made in the original pages. On page 4, Anik is leaning hard to the viewer's left. So while Emily is rocking her long, skibbity toilet neck, Anik is going for the latest developments in Leaning Tower of Pisa Couture. Page 5 has a few minor errors, but I think the most egregious one is the boxed perspective in the middle panel. It's way off, and literally I don't know where to begin as to how to fix this. It's practically unfixable. Throw it in the dumpster. I mentioned this in the first video, but I used to and still struggle with perspective, and the more I struggled, the less motivated I was to get better at it, because I thought, what was the point if I was only going to struggle? That being said, bless the perspective ruler on Clip Studio Paint, because I would have been utterly lost without it. Then there's page 6. Theo's hands! That's not how it works, I'm going to cry, what was I thinking? Anyway, on to the fixing bit before I lose my mind. I completely changed the panel compositions as I've done with the rest of the comic, arranging things in a way that would make sense while not making any decisions that could potentially confuse the reader. There's also a thing called the tangent, where two or more lines interact in a way that the artist did not intend, and as a result can create confusion in the reader as to what they're looking at. There's also little things like having your speech bubble sit right at the edge of the panel border and having it get in the way of important information, which is a major error to avoid. Like I said in my last installment of the series, I've grown to be a little more lenient with the placement of things while at the same time trying not to outright break any rules. During my college days, I used to get really in my head about following the rules of panel composition, and as a result, it only hampered my growth and ability to execute my story ideas in the long run. These days, I'm an advocate of the saying, understand the rules before you break them, but, and I'm pretty sure I've mentioned this before, while I was in college, I was a major perfectionist living by the motto of, adhere to the rules at all costs, even if it meant sacrificing the opportunity to really show the mood of a scene. And looking back now, I think this is part of what kept me from pushing the boundaries of what I could do as a cartoonist and storyteller, although there are several more reasons that factored in, of course. I still tend to struggle with this, but in the 4.5 years since graduating college, I think I've gotten better at it. Since we're talking about panel composition, I do want to go into a bit of a tangent, pause, in regards to the pacing of a scene and how it factored into the process regarding the remake of Heliotrope. Even though the story is mostly a group of characters conversing and exchanging words about this potentially dangerous plot that's been rearing its head behind the scenes, I still wanted to make things interesting. But the thing is, and this is something I've noticed recently, is that panel composition tends to be a little more straightforward during normal scenes or scenes with more chill vibes, as opposed to, let's say, an action sequence, where I would have more freedom to run wild with composing the panels. At least, this is what I've observed in my own work. Still, I wanted to change things up to convey the mood of the scene, so it wasn't so stagnant. I still have nightmares of my old panel compositions sometimes, and I am trying to move past that. Please help me. Looking back, there are a couple of things I could have switched up, but there's only so many ways you can get it to work, and again, I'm doing this remake for fun. However, there were still some things from the remake script that I knew I had to include, like the shot of Emily on the bottom of page 5, for instance. I wanted to show that she is heavily reluctant to return to the group she was once a part of, while partially alluding to the incident that made her leave in the first place. Same with the borderless panel on page 6. After Anik makes the bargain with her, Emily becomes stuck. Does she go with the offer or not? This is actually a trick I learned in college, and not having the borders illustrates the moment of tension or resonance going on in the panel. And of course, I wanted to show the kind of married old couple arguing vibe going on in Gray and Theo's conversation, where Gray comes to understand Emily's power and her value in Theo's plan to stop the plot. For any of you who might be looking at me funny, I literally don't know what else to call it. Ha 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 ha, funny. Originally, I was going to have Emily be shown in the bottom panel, but I just decided to have that last panel be a build-up to what you're going to see in the next 2 pages. On page 6, I wanted to do something fun with Gray and Theo going back and forth about Emily's specific ability, while at the same time doing my best to vary all the shots. Because varying your shots is fun. Also, as you can see, Theo has moved to his bed because he got bored with being in his chair, and he does tend to move around. Even though in the original comic he's in his chair the whole time. But you do see the chair way in the foreground. Just something to spice things up so he's not in his chair all the time. I figured that'd be very Theo of him. Usually drawing the character before the background is easier for me since I tend to work the background around the character themselves, but this time in the panel where Theo is sitting on the bed, I drew the background first. I don't know what possessed me to do that, honestly, but we're here. It was convenient being able to draw Theo on a separate layer after the background was finished, so I might try doing it again. The line art went mostly well. I say mostly because my tablet pen was starting to act up, sometimes taking multiple clicks for it to work. I had to update my tablet driver, fiddle around with the settings on Clip Studio Paint to see if that was the issue, or maybe it's just being finicky with my recording software running in the back so I can capture the process of drawing these pages. But the thing is, it's never done that with OBS running at the same time, and considering my tablet is almost 5 years old, it may just be time for a new one. I'm going to run a few more tests to see if this is the case though. As with the previous pages, I kept the base colors separate from the shading so I would have more freedom to mess with the shading if I had to, keeping in line with the bluish-green overtone I chose for the remake. So this meant giving all of the colors a blue-green tint to them and muting all of the warm colors in the process. The bottom panel on page 5 wasn't as bad to work on as I thought it was going to be. I think it was because of a combination of keeping things simple while keeping the shading on a separate layer from the base colors. To Emily's left, however, you see that entire side of the background in mostly grayscale with flashes of orange to signify a fire on the ground, adding dark effects around the borders to further illustrate that this is a flashback, and to show the reader that this event happened before the story takes place. I didn't record this bit, but I wanted to do something fun with the speech bubbles on page 6, having them exist outside of the panel's borders to convey the back and forth between Gray and Theo in some way. But also because it's fun to mess with panel boundaries. So now that pages 5 and 6 are just about done, what's going to happen in the next 2 pages? Without revealing too much, Theo goes into why Emily was such a valuable asset to his group, and we'll also see whether or not Emily has made her decision after everything Anik has told her. There is a lot on her shoulders, so this isn't going to be very easy. Someone please help her. Okay, no, I'm joking. But anyway, that's going to do it for this video. If you like this and you want to see more from me, make sure to like, share, subscribe, and if you want, follow my social medias in the description. I post new videos every other Monday, and I mostly draw and talk about art. Also, if you want to further support me, I also have a Ko-fi and an Etsy shop where I sell a bunch of handmade things. And yeah, that's about everything. Thanks for watching. Oh, wait. I almost forgot. Before we go, I have a special video to play. Roll the advertisement.